have three very special guests here today, two colleagues I've worked with continuously. We travel the world, but Doctors JJ and Desiree Hurtak are the authors of the Mind Dynamics book, which is Survey of Remote Viewing. They're scholars. They are the best. They're one of the best experts on the actually application of consciousness in terms of spiritual awareness, linguistics, anthropology, and UFOs. And they're joined today by Glen Rhine. Do you want to introduce Glen there, Desiree?
Yes, Glen, of course, is a wonderful pioneer in biology, biochemistry, every aspect of the new developments we would call in evolutionary biology.
Historically, he worked for Estee Lauder, actually on the East Coast, and now he really works in analyzing the energy forces that people are susceptible to, and also maybe in positive ways.
Everybody in Russia, Germany, England looks to Glen for answers because he's been at the forefront. We're honored. He's a colleague. He's also aware of my work with the Keys of Enoch as representing a blueprint of how science, psychology, and spiritual philosophy bring us together in terms of a whole new humanity.
So I want to start a little bit with the history of remote viewing, because it really goes back, I'm not sure what Alan said in his first class, to Ingo Swann meeting actually Hal Puthoff at a conference. And Ingo showed Hal being a scientist out in California, what he could do, that he actually could see things remotely at a distance. And then Hal got Russell Targ on board, and they ultimately, and everyone taking this class should watch this, got money from the CIA. How they got it was that they remote viewed a national security agency's secret vault and even got the names of secret programs.
We're going too fast on this. Actually, they were interested in other objects, and it so happened that military intelligence, naval intelligence, and the CIA became involved. But before that, there was a whole historic record of remote viewing. I'm a scholar of ancient texts, and even in the Bible, the book of Psalms, Psalm 139, King David speaks of a person who is able, and I quote, was to ascend into the heavens, as well as into the inner depths of the earth. Where should I go from thy spirit? If I ascend into heaven, there your spirit will be. If I go into the midst of the ground of the earth, there also your spirit will be. So even thousands of years before Christ, there was a recognition by the prophets of Israel, as well as other great thinkers, that the mind was not localized into the body, could see and experience the divine frontier if necessary. And so this was a background to many of the mystics throughout the world, both in the East and West. Bringing this now to what Desiree just said, Ingo Swann appeared on the scene as a boy genius with the ability to see distant objects.
But as our book, Mind Dynamics, describes in terms of scientific terms, this all happens, and Alan may have already described this to you, in terms of the fact that we believe that consciousness is more like a field. It doesn't reside in your head exclusively. You're more like the sender and receiver. You tap into those fields. Now, what remote viewing has actually shown, and this is some of the work of Elizabeth Rauscher and Russell Targ, is that by your ability to be part of that global consciousness field, and I would even say cosmic consciousness field, you are there. So they were looking, if they were going to remote view Russia, for example, they were looking to see how long it took them to see something in Russia, and it was instantaneous.
Thousands of miles away.
It was faster than the speed of light, which means they were there. And that's what happens when you start doing remote viewing. You tap into that greater consciousness field, and then you are present and there. I just want to add one more point, and then we'll ask Glen to join in. One of the things people often ask is, well, what's it take to really be a remote viewer? And I said, well, Ingo Swann was excellent. And then they got Pat Price, who used to, just for fun, actually look for Soviet submarines under the ground. He had a map on his wall. This is before he was a professional remote viewer, and he would track them around the world. That was what he did. But then there was Hella Hammond, and she was the secretary from down the hall.
With no scientific background.
And she was interested in it, but she had never done it before. and they got her involved, and she was really one of the top remote viewers. So Russell will always tell you anybody can do it. I think that's the most important thing to know.
Now, just another word, because we were talking about Ingo Swann. The cover of the book that Russell and I put together, End of Suffering, was illustrated by Ingo. You see this picture here of the cosmic egg, which represents the human mind with the whirling galaxy. According to Ingo, we're all part of this great mind of the universe, and we have to be able to visualize something beyond our local reality. And so this is where he came up with the terminology of local consciousness within us, non-local consciousness that takes us around the world to other distant places. So he was the boy genius that convinced Russell Targ, Harold Putoff, Pat Price, and so many others that his way, his approach was the best, which is to quiet the mind and to enjoy the possibility that we can be in all dimensions simultaneously. So our work, which Ellen just mentioned, is really the real X-Files, the real story of all of this research going on behind the scene for 20 some years in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s of how boy geniuses and girl geniuses could, from other parts of the world, could tune in to anything from archaeology to space science.
Well, I just want to ask Glenn, like in your research, Glenn, you've really looked at the scope of consciousness and in terms of biology, quantum biology. Do you want to explain some of your perspectives? Yeah.
Sure. Hi, folks. Well, I am an experimental, actually neurochemistry. My PhD is in neurochemistry. So for me, the question is not can the mind do these things, but how and why, and what's the mechanism. And I mean, experimentally, I've been able to demonstrate that healers can project their consciousness to a biological system, which can be thousands of miles away, and I can still measure a biological effect as a result of that intervention. So having done several experiments like that, I started to ask the question, well, what is the mind? And what, for that matter, what is consciousness, and what's the relationship? And that gets a little complicated. But for me, consciousness is the information and the essence of the mind. But to understand how the mind can actually leave the body and go somewhere, you really have to think of the mind as an energy. And to understand that, I distinguish between the lower mind and the higher mind. Because the lower mind is the one that's connected to the physical body, where the emotions are, where our memories are, and that's the part that can control our physiology and allow us, the mind-body medicine phenomena. But then there's the higher mind, and the higher mind is a higher form of energy, if you will, that can actually travel beyond space and time. So what kind of energies do we know that can do that? Well, you've probably heard about scalar energy. That is one example of a type of energy that can do that. And the other kind of energy that I'm most excited about is quantum energy. And I actually just got back from a big international conference on quantum biology. All these conventional scientists from Harvard and MIT, who are studying how the body is able to process quantum events and exhibit quantum properties, even right down to the DNA, which JJ and I are working on at the moment. But the point to make here is that these kind of descriptions of the mind allow us to understand that there is science behind this. It's not like it's a new age kind of crazy thing, but it is just an aspect of our brain, if you will, because the brain, the mind, the lower mind, and the higher mind are all connected. So when you leave the body and you come back, you can transfer that information back into the brain, which will then transfer it to the body. So that's the short version.
Actually, and of course, no intellectual overlay, because if your lower mind starts functioning and saying, oh, this is what it is, or that's what it is, then you lose the image. If it's just what you saw you put down, you write, you draw, you're usually going to be very, very close, if not 100% accurate.
So Glenn is right. There is a type of energy aspect, energy medicine or vibratory medicine that's behind the human psyche, the human mind. And if we're too rational, we dampen or we suppress really the intuitive side that's marvelous. And so besides the five senses, we have the sixth sense, which we will call the higher mind or mind two, that guides us, that gives us this ability to reach out and to have these unusual abilities to see things sometimes before they happen, or to recall things in greater detail that normal minds and normal scientists cannot explain. But we're on the lip of a whole new breakthrough in science, and that is the use of remote viewing as a tool of education, of sociology and society at large, in medicine and healing, and of course, looking at distant planets. I had the opportunity, and Alan, you can fill in on this, years ago through remote viewing to see pyramids on Mars, not only just pyramids, but pyramids in a grid system or a geometric relationship that NASA later proved was correct. And so we can go out into space and see things possibly of the future that can help us understand that evolution goes forward beyond our planet. So this is the excitement of young people. We're going into space. We're going to find aspects of higher intelligence, I believe, and we're going to rewrite history as we begin to realize we're not meant to be only on Mother Earth, but we're meant to expand into the heavens.
Well, I just want to say that's the ultimate goal of this class, is to go off planet, you know, and visit other life, other civilizations, to boldly go where no one's gone before. And we could do that with consciousness. And that is why, you know, the work of the Hurtaks and Glenn are so important, because they've laid a foundation. Like JJ said, he had remote viewed pyramids on Mars before anyone ever published the pictures. And he just tuned in. Do you want to talk about how you tuned in there, JJ, about?
I was able to concentrate and visualize what I felt are neighboring planets. But then when I came to Mars, a sister planet, I saw not only one pyramid, but I saw four of them, major and minor, arranged in a particular geometry, similar to the pyramids in Egypt, but slightly different. And I gave the details to my colleagues in NASA, who said, well, that's an interesting speculation, but we don't accept that. But when they did go making the probe to Mars, guess what? The Neolasium Quadrangle, the southern part of Martian surface, they found those four pyramids exactly as I described. I said, please give me a copy so I could show my students. And so they gave me a copy. So in 1973, Desiree and I published this in our book, The Keys of Enoch. If you get this book on the internet, Keys of Enoch, you'll see the whole picture, the whole background of how this is, if Desiree can hold the book up.
Right.
You see those major and minor pyramids,
Yeah.
hundreds of times larger than the pyramids in Egypt. That shows that they are not just the natural byproducts of supersonic winds. They were definitely made and structured mathematically.
And I just want to say, not only was that a remote viewing off planet, but also Ingo Swann actually documented one of his. He and Harold Sherman, who was also very famous, actually remote viewed the area of Saturn, and also in terms of
the rings of Jupiter.
The rings of Jupiter. Now, at that time, there was no known rings of Jupiter, but he recorded it. He actually said what they were and that they would be found. And that was early in 72. And it wasn't until Voyager that actually confirmed that he was absolutely accurate, that there were rings around Jupiter.
Which means the life forces are not limited to Mother Earth as we define it. And I believe that in the coming disclosures of our government, that there will be evidence and testimony that some of our friends come from the ring system of Jupiter and Saturn. I'm speaking of non-human intelligence.
And finally, just a final word, basically people ask, what can you use it for? Of course, all of you are interested in various things such as healing. You can actually see, a friend of mine's a great healer, and before he even touches somebody, he actually can look at them and remote view exactly what's wrong with them. He can see whether it's in the neck or the arm or whatever, he actually sees it. Other people just use it to find their keys. And my friend Elizabeth Rauscher, she would use it to see what was in the food store when she would go there. So there's unlimited abilities to use remote viewing.
So we're just at the beginning of a whole new frontier. And we thank you, Alan, for your great leadership skills, your writing skills, your speaking skills. All of you that are tuning in today to this program are very fortunate to have you, Alan Steinfeld, as the guide, as the interpreter, as well as the researcher, with, of course, the three of us here in Sedona, beaming forth this wonderful message that we are not alone in the universe. Our mind is the link through remote viewing, remote vibration, and I will add to that even spiritual music that gives us the joy of what King David writes about in the Psalms, that there's the glory of the divine source.
And maybe Glenn has a few final words.
Well, for me, this is all about, on a practical note, how do you shift your consciousness from your lower mind to your higher mind? And that's a skill that we all need to focus on, because it's there, but we normally don't have access to it. You know, the mind is focused on the body, the lower mind. So, there are techniques to do that, but just conceptually, to understand that's the practice and the visualization, if you will, that we need to learn to do.
Right. I think that's a really good point, Glenn, because we have to get out of the way of the ego personality and the association with the body to realize that we're part of a bigger cosmos. That's my feeling. Yeah.
This is the change. This is the evolutionary, shall we say, or the quantum leap from mind one to mind two, from the lower mind to the higher mind, and ultimately to what I will call the unity of the spiritual and the scientific in the new sense of universal knowledge, universal joy, universal prosperity, that we were going to be able to solve these problems on this planet as we interconnect with the cosmic mind, learn the new science, learn the new sociology, but most importantly, learn how to use the heart in positive resonance, purpose, compassion, and direction.
So we'll let you go. Have a great class. Thanks, everyone. And I know it's going to be fabulous. Have a great
And those who are interested, again, this is a very important book. As for beginners, the book called End of Suffering by Russell Targ and myself, because we have to put away negativity, the suffering, the negativity that pulls us down, so we don't use the higher mind, the creative mind, the instinctual side that sees the greater picture of life.
Have a great class.
Well,
bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
I appreciate your input here. It's really fantastic. And we'll be in touch, and I'll talk to you guys soon. I lecture with JJ and Desiree around the country. We're going to do a remote viewing, multiple dimension class at the Conscious Life Expo and many different events. We'll be talking about that in Egypt if you're coming with us to Egypt. But they are real scholars and experts in the field, and I'm really happy they joined us. So I want to take off on what they kind of said. I mean, Glenn's saying that you can't remote view with your personality. It doesn't work. It's like,
Right.
Right. So there's actually, I want to show you a little cartoon that demonstrates that. Hey, pal, you have no idea who I think I am. Because if you think you're your personality, if you think you're your history, if you think, if you really think anything, that's in the way of becoming empty. You see, the more you become empty in a way of all thought, you can start to receive what's in the quantum field. We're here to tap into this infinite nature. That's basically why we're here in the class, because we are infinite, and we just have to realize when we become the infinite mind, we can know everything about anything, anywhere. So like I always say, no one can teach you remote viewing, but you can learn it because you already are it.